No mail-order bride lasted with the mountain man, until the obese one refused to leave on Christmas. The train whistle echoed through the frozen valley like a lonely cry, scattering a flock of ravens into the pale winter sky. The mountains towered on every side, sharp, white, unyielding, much like the man who stood waiting beneath them. Elias Thorne planted his boots firmly in the thick snow outside the sparsely used Montana station, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He hated crowds, noise, and surprises, but he hated mail-order brides most of all. And yet here he was again. He muttered under his breath forming cold clouds in the air. One more foolish attempt. After this I'm done. The first bride had left after a single night. The second hadn't even stayed long enough to unpack. The third said he had the emotional warmth of a frozen creek. Fine by him. Elias didn't need a woman. He needed help on the homestead, and maybe, just maybe, he hoped for a companion who wouldn't fear the wilderness or complain about the quiet. But every bride the agency sent was soft-spoken, timid, or looking for town life, not the rugged solitude he lived in. He tightened his jaw as the steam engine slowed, hissing like some great beast settling into slumber. Passengers stepped down, miners, merchants, a family of 5. And then he saw her. A woman stepped out, holding a well-worn carpetbag in one hand and a Bible pressed firmly to her chest in the other. She was soft, full-bodied, generously curved, wrapped in a heavy patchwork coat that added even more volume. Snowflakes clung to her dark hair, catching the faint sunlight like tiny jewels. Her cheeks were rosy. Her eyes warm and brown. Her smile hopeful and fragile, as if held together by prayer. Elias frowned. This wasn't the woman from the photograph. The agency had clearly sent him someone else. Someone bigger, rounder, different. She spotted him and lifted one mittened hand in a shy wave. "Mr. Thorne?" she called gently. Elias didn't move. His disappointment weighed him down like wet snow. He felt foolish, almost tricked. The woman approached anyway, breath trembling in the cold. "I'm Clara Mae Whitaker." She offered a small curtsy, voice soft but steady. "Your bride, if you'll have me." Elias's jaw tightened at the word bride. "You're not who they promised." The words hung in the cold like frost. For a heartbeat Clara looked down. A flicker of pain crossed her face. Then she lifted her chin, her breath visible in the air, and her voice, soft, steady, sure, broke through the silence. "Mr. Thorne," she said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I am who God made me." Elias's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected that kind of answer. But she wasn't finished. "I cannot pretend to be someone else," she continued quietly. "I cannot undo the years that shaped me or the grief that changed me. But I can be honest and I can be faithful." Her gaze was steady, her words simple, but they carried a strength that unsettled him. "If I am not what you hoped for," she added softly, "then that disappointment is yours, not God's." The wind rustled the pines. Steam hissed from the train. And Elias, hard, stoic Elias, found himself without a single word to say. Finally he cleared his throat. "You'll stay until Christmas," he muttered gruffly. "After that you can go your way, and I'll go mine." Clara nodded slowly, her hands clasped around her Bible. "I understand," she said. "But I came here because I prayed about it. If God led me up this mountain, I trust He has a reason." Something about that quiet confidence stirred him more than he wanted to admit. Elias grabbed her trunk and turned toward the wagon. "Come on. It's a long ride." Clara followed, the snow crunching beneath her boots. She didn't speak again, but as she walked, Elias caught faint whispers of her prayer carried on the wind. "Lord, guide my steps, even if they lead through rejection. Let my presence bring peace, not bitterness." He stopped for half a second, glancing over his shoulder. Her head was bowed. Her face calm. There was no trace of anger, only faith. He turned away quickly and helped her up into the wagon. Her hand was small and warm against his glove. He withdrew it too fast, as though burned. The road home wound through thick forest and icy creeks. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the creak of the wagon wheels. Elias focused on the trail, but Clara's voice, soft and steady, rose behind him as she read from her Bible. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to give you hope and a future." Elias said nothing, but the words sank deeper than she knew. Hours later, when they reached his cabin, a solitary home carved from the mountainside, Clara looked around with wide eyes. Smoke curled from the chimney. Snow drifted against the porch rails. To most women it would have looked cold and lonely. To her it looked like purpose. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elias frowned. "It's plain." Nothing more. But Clara smiled softly. Plain things are what God uses most. He grunted and carried her trunk inside, hiding the faintest tug in his heart. He didn't want her faith. He didn't want her warmth. He didn't want to feel anything. But that night, as he sat alone by the fire, he heard her gentle voice from the small room down the hall, praying, singing quietly, thanking God for a roof, for warmth, for a chance to stay until Christmas. And for reasons he couldn't name, Elias Thorne, hard mountain man, bitter recluse, couldn't fall asleep. The trail to Elias Thorne's cabin wound upward through forest so still it felt like God himself was holding his breath. By the time they reached the homestead, a sturdy log cabin tucked between towering pines, the sun had dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow. Clara studied the cabin with quiet wonder. "It looks peaceful," she murmured. Elias huffed. "It's small, cold, rougher than what you're used to." She glanced at him gently. "You don't know yet what I'm used to." He didn't respond. He didn't want to know. He wanted distance, silence, and for the next few weeks to pass quickly. But Clara Mae Whitaker wasn't a woman who fit into silence. The moment she crossed the threshold, she stopped short and pulled in a breath as if she'd entered a sacred space. The cabin was simple, wood walls, stone hearth, rough-hewn table, but clean. Without a word, she slipped off her coat and gloves, setting her Bible on the table with reverence. "I can make this a home," she said quietly. Elias stiffened. "It doesn't need to be a home. Not for you." Clara turned toward him, her soft features calm. "Then I'll make it warm. For both of us." The evening routine of strangers. She moved through the cabin with gentle efficiency, gathering wood, stirring embers, and humming a hymn so soft Elias could barely catch the tune. It was unfamiliar, something about God being steady in the winter storms. He watched her from the doorway, irritation curling in his stomach. "You don't have to do all that," he said gruffly. Clara didn't stop tending the fire. "I know. So why are you doing it?" She stood and dusted off her skirt. "Because work is a blessing. And kindness is never wasted." The words hit him sharper than he expected. He turned away, jaw clenched, and grabbed a lantern. "I'll get more water." Clara looked at him, really looked at him, eyes soft, seeing deeper than he wanted. "Be careful. The snow's slick." He grunted. "I know how to walk." But Clara's concern lingered in the air, warm and unwanted. A cabin softened by warmth. When Elias returned with the water pail, Clara had already swept the floors, unpacked her small bundle of belongings, and hung her coat neatly by the door. But what struck him most was the pot simmering over the fire. "You cooked?" he asked, confused. "Stew," Clara said shyly. "Just something simple. I noticed you had dried venison and root vegetables. I hope you don't mind." He didn't know how to say he did mind. Or that he didn't. Or that no one had cooked for him since his mother. So he just muttered, "It's fine." They ate in silence, though Clara bowed her head first. "Lord," she prayed, "thank you for warmth, for food, and for the chance to serve. Bless this home. Bless Elias." Elias shifted uncomfortably. "You don't have to pray for me." "I know," she said again, the corners of her mouth softening. "Still I do." Her faith wasn't loud. It wasn't forceful. It was steady, like a candle refusing to go out, even in winter's breath. Nightfall, a new resolve. After supper, Elias sat by the hearth sharpening his knife, pretending not to notice Clara sewing a torn seam in his coat. "You don't need to fix that," he muttered. Clara smiled softly, threading her needle with practiced hands. "I don't fix things because I must. I fix them because they belong to the people I care about." Elias froze. She seemed to realize the weight of her words and quickly added, "I mean, people I hope to serve well. For these few weeks." But the slip had already lodged itself into his chest. He pushed to his feet abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. "I'm going to bed." Clara didn't flinch. She simply folded his coat neatly and set it aside. "Good night, Elias." He paused in the doorway to his room. Something about the way she said his name, a blend of warmth, prayer, and gentleness, struck him in a place he didn't want touched. When he finally lay in bed, he stared up at the beams overhead, scowling at the unfamiliar ache in his chest. She had been here only a few hours and already? The cabin didn't feel empty. And he didn't feel as alone. He clamped a hand over his eyes. "This is temporary," he whispered to the dark. "Just until Christmas." But downstairs, Clara knelt by the fire, hands folded, voice soft as a snowflake drifting to earth. "Lord, help me be light in this home. Help me see this man the way you do. And help my heart not break, even if he never wants me here." Her prayer drifted through the cabin, settling over him like a blanket he didn't ask for, and yet desperately needed. Elias turned his face to the wall, scowling as warmth spread through him. This woman was going to be trouble. Not because she was difficult, but because she cared. And Elias Thorne had no defenses left against a gentle, persistent heart. Winter settled over the mountains like a thick, white blanket, softening every sound except the crack and groan of trees bending under ice. Each morning, Elias left before dawn, without a word, and returned late, shoulders dusted in snow, eyes shadowed by work and something deeper. Clara watched him from the cabin window each day, her breath forming small clouds on the glass. She didn't ask questions. She didn't beg for attention. But she prayed. As Elias trudged into the woods with his axe, she whispered, "Lord, whatever wound he carries, heal it in your time." She didn't know how close her words came to the truth. A life built on silence. Elias chopped wood as if it offended him. Each crack of the axe against the pine echoed through the forest, sharp, angry, cathartic. He told himself he was avoiding Clara because he needed space. Truthfully, he was avoiding her because he didn't know how to face gentleness. Softness made him remember. And remembering hurt. By midday, he paused and leaned against a tree, breath steaming in the cold air. His knee ached from an old injury. His hands trembled from exhaustion. The kind he responded to easily. But Clara's tenderness? Her kindness? Her prayers? Those rattled him. Those stirred up the grief he'd buried for years. He closed his eyes, and the image of his late fiancée flickered, a laughing girl with flaxen hair riding a wagon toward him, before the ice took her life. He exhaled shakily. He'd sworn never to love again. Never to risk that ache. And now God had sent him a woman with a heart so big it threatened to fill the whole cabin. He shoved the memory away and slammed the axe down again. Clara's quiet devotion. While Elias battled trees and memories, Clara transformed the cabin in ways she didn't even realize. She washed the windows until winter sunlight streamed through. She stitched curtains from fabric scraps. She reorganized the pantry, humming hymns about God's faithfulness through every season. Every night, she set aside a portion of their meager food for him, warming a bowl on the hearth when he arrived. At first, Elias ignored the gestures. But something in him softened each time he came home to a warm room and a warmer smile. "Long day?" she would ask gently. He would grunt. "Long enough." She never pressed for more. That made it harder somehow. One evening, he found her bent over his coat again, sewing up another tear. "You don't need to fix everything," he said quietly. Clara looked up. Her expression was calm, almost serene. "I don't fix things because they're broken. I fix things because they matter." Elias swallowed hard. "I don't matter." Her eyes softened in a way that made him want to look away. "To God you do." The fire popped in the silence between them. The story that broke the ice. It was the coldest night of the winter when the truth finally cracked open. Elias returned later than usual, limping slightly, face paler than usual. Clara's breath caught. "You're hurt," she said, stepping toward him. "I'm fine." He brushed past her. She didn't believe him. "Let me look." "I said I'm fine." His voice thundered through the cabin, louder than he intended. Clara stepped back, but not in fear. In sadness. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Elias froze. He had expected anger or tears. But not sorrow. He sank onto a stool beside the fire, rubbing his knee with a wince he couldn't hide. "You don't have to help," he muttered when she knelt beside him, gently lifting his pant leg. Her hands were warm, soothing even through fabric. "I don't expect you to care." Clara paused, her voice barely above a whisper. "God expects me to." Elias' chest tightened. No one had looked at him like that, like he was worth mending, in years. Clara tied a warm cloth around his knee, her fingers lingering only long enough to offer comfort. When she finished, she sat back on her heels. "Elias, what are you carrying that hurts this much?" He stared into the fire. Sparks danced upward, disappearing into the chimney. For a long time he said nothing. Clara didn't move, didn't pry. She simply waited, patient as snow. Finally his voice broke loose. Quiet. Rough. "My first bride died coming here." Clara's breath caught. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry out. She bowed her head. "I'm so sorry." He swallowed. Her wagon slipped on the ice. She never made it. And he clenched his jaw. "I should have gone to meet her halfway. I should have." "You couldn't have known," Clara whispered. "I should have known." The words tore from him raw and jagged. "I should have protected her. It's my fault she died." Clara placed a trembling hand over his. Elias stiffened, but he didn't pull away. "Elias, you're carrying a burden God never asked you to carry," she said softly. "You're blaming yourself for what only heaven could see." His throat worked. "I don't know how to let go." Clara's thumb brushed his knuckles, gentle, comforting, full of unspoken prayers. "Then let me hold some of it with you," she whispered. He turned toward her, eyes glistening, shocked at his own tears. For the first time, Elias didn't hide. For the first time he let someone see the hurt behind the silence. And Clara carried it with grace. A shift begins. Later that night, after he'd gone to bed, Clara knelt by the fire as she always did, but this time her prayer trembled. "Lord, heal the wound he hides so deeply. Give him peace where grief lives. And help me be patient, as you mend him." Upstairs, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams. He wasn't used to compassion. He wasn't used to a woman staying when things got painful. He wasn't used to feeling anything. But Clara Mae's kindness? Her prayers? Her unwavering gentleness? They were beginning to thaw something long frozen. And that frightened him more than the emptiness ever had. The snow deepened as December marched on, blanketing the mountains in white silence. Each morning, Clara swept the porch free of powder, watching her breath curl into the frozen air. Each morning, she reminded herself, "He gave me until Christmas. That's all." But Elias, he had begun to change. Slowly, stubbornly, like ice melting under a reluctant sun. He no longer ignored her presence. He no longer flinched when she spoke softly to him. He even ate the meals she prepared without muttering criticism under his breath. But he also kept his emotional distance, as if afraid getting too close would break something inside him. And Clara, gentle, hopeful Clara, felt that distance like wind against an open wound. Still she worked. Still she prayed. Still she stayed. A cabin transformed by tender hands. The cabin had never known warmth beyond the hearth fire. But Clara filled the space with quiet touches of life. She hung a sprig of pine over the kitchen window. She sewed a quilt for the bed in the guest room, her room. She arranged pine cones and candles on the mantel, humming, O come, Emmanuel," as she worked. Elias came in from the woods one evening and stopped in the doorway, snow dripping from his hat, breath catching. The cabin glowed. Soft, inviting, alive. He didn't understand the ache in his chest. "You've been busy," he said gruffly. Clara turned from the hearth, wiping her hands on her apron. Her cheeks flushed from the firelight. "I like making things feel cared for." Elias cleared his throat. You do that well." It was barely a compliment, rough around the edges, but Clara felt the warmth of it all the same. Her smile was small and hopeful. Elias looked away quickly, afraid of what that smile stirred in him. The tree no one expected. A few days later, Elias came home with a small cedar bundled under one arm. Clara blinked, surprised. "Is that?" He dropped it by the hearth. "A Christmas tree. You mentioned wanting one." Her breath caught. She hadn't meant for him to do anything about it. She hadn't even asked. "Elias, it's beautiful." He shrugged, embarrassed. Wasn't doing anything else on the trail. But Clara saw the truth. He had gone out of his way for her. That alone made her eyes shine. She worked that evening fashioning ornaments from cinnamon sticks, dried berries, and tiny scraps of ribbon she'd brought with her from Georgia. The cabin filled with scents of spice and pine. Elias watched from the kitchen table, arms crossed, pretending not to be charmed. "You enjoy this stuff," he muttered. Clara smiled softly. "Christmas is a reminder that God sends light where it's darkest." He shifted, uncomfortable with how her faith seemed to slip under his skin. "Not everyone gets light." Clara's expression softened. "Light comes to those who let it in." Her eyes flicked to his, searching, gentle. Elias looked away. That truth hit too close. The weight of the deadline. Each passing day drew them closer to Christmas, the day Clara was expected to leave. And though she never mentioned it, Clara felt the deadline like a tightening rope around her heart. One snowy morning she found Elias mending a sled by the porch. Snowflakes dusted his shoulders. His breath came out in slow plumes. "Elias," she said softly, stepping closer. "When Christmas comes, will you want me to?" He didn't let her finish. "I already told you the plan," he said, eyes fixed on the wood in his hands. "After Christmas you're free to go." The words sliced through her soft heart. She nodded slowly, swallowing her pain. "I understand." Elias heard the tremble in her voice, and for the rest of the day, his stomach twisted with regret he couldn't name. The night she nearly broke. Snowstorms battered the cabin that night. Branches thrashed outside the windows, wind howling like wolves. Clara lit the oil lamps one by one, their glow soft against the storm's fury. When Elias came in late from checking the livestock, Clara met him with a warm towel and a worried frown. "You shouldn't have gone out in this weather," she scolded gently. "Had to," he muttered. "Storm's worse than I expected." She took his coat, wringing the water from it. Her hands shook slightly, not from the cold but from the ache in her chest. "Are you well?" he asked, sensing her tension for the first time. Clara blinked, surprised he noticed. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Her gaze dropped to the floor, voice trembling like a candle flame. "I'm just preparing myself." "For what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "For the day you send me away." The room went still. Elias felt something inside him lurch, hard and painful. He opened his mouth but couldn't form words. Clara's confession had pierced deep. She turned her face away, tears glistening. "I'm trying not to hope for something you don't want." Elias's hands clenched. He felt torn open. "Clara?" His voice came low and rough. "It's not that simple. Isn't it?" Her eyes met his, brave, tender, hurting. "All I want is to stay. But I won't force myself where I'm not wanted." Elias swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her she was wanted. He wanted to say the words that trembled in the back of his throat. But fear held him back. Fear of loving again. Fear of losing again. So he said nothing. Clara nodded, understanding more than he wished she did. "Good night, Elias." She turned away and he stood frozen, watching the woman he was starting to care for drift slowly out of reach. A prayer that softened heaven. Long after she went to bed, Clara knelt by the fire, tears slipping silently onto her clasped hands. "Lord, I know you brought me here for a purpose. But if that purpose is only to show him kindness before I go, give me the strength to accept it." Upstairs, Elias lay awake, her words echoing in his mind. He'd told himself he didn't want a wife. He'd told himself he couldn't love again. He'd told himself she was temporary. But Clara's tears, her prayers, her aching hope, they cracked open something deep inside him. And as the storm raged outside, Elias finally whispered the truth for the first time. "I don't want her to go." But he didn't yet know how to ask her to stay. Where faith, courage, and care meet in the heart of winter. The snowstorm raged for 3 long days, turning the mountains into a world of white, where even the tallest pines seemed swallowed by winter's embrace. Inside the cabin, however, something far more remarkable was happening. A quiet battle between stubborn pride and persistent love. Elias Thorne had begun to notice things he hadn't expected. He noticed Clara Mae Whitaker humming softly as she worked, her voice so gentle it barely disturbed the crackle of the hearth. He noticed the way she moved around the cabin with quiet care, never overstepping, never imposing, always offering help without a single demand. And he noticed, much to his own disbelief, that his home, once cold and austere, now felt warmer. Not from the fire. From her. Her steadfast presence. That evening, Clara knelt by the hearth, stirring the stew she had prepared hours earlier. The aroma of venison and root vegetables filled the cabin, mingling with the scent of pine and the faint tang of snow drifting in through the door. Her cheeks were flushed from the heat, her eyes bright with purpose. Elias watched her from the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, trying to look indifferent. "She doesn't belong here," he told himself. "She's too gentle, too kind, too everything." But she did belong. Somehow she fit into the cracks of his life in a way he didn't want to admit. Her laughter, when she had accidentally spilled flour that morning, still echoed in his mind. Her prayers, quiet, steady prayers before every meal, settled over him like a soft, comforting blanket. Her care, persistent, patient care, was beginning to melt something inside him. And it frightened him. The conversation that shook him. "Clara," he said finally, voice rough, breaking the hush of the storm outside. She looked up, startled, a faint smile trembling on her lips. "You've been busy," he said, as if that could cover the turmoil in his chest. Clara smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I like keeping busy. It helps me think." "Think about what?" he asked, unsure whether he wanted the answer. "Hope," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hope that God does something good even when we can't see it. Hope that he softens hearts, and moves people who've stopped believing." Elias felt the weight of her words. He shifted uncomfortably. "Some hearts stay cold," he muttered, almost as if challenging her, almost as if daring her to be wrong. "Only if they're left untouched," she said softly. Her gaze met his, steady, honest and full of trust. But I've seen God work wonders, Elias. And I believe he can even reach you. He looked away, the warmth in his chest twisting in confusion. Could she see me? Could she really see me? The confession that changed everything. Later, after the storm had eased and the cabin smelled of warmth and pine, Elias found Clara reading her Bible in the glow of the fire. She wasn't reading aloud, just sitting quietly, letting the words settle in her heart. What verse is that? He asked, hesitant. Isaiah 43 verse 19, she said softly. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth, do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. He swallowed. Why that one? Because, she said, closing the book gently, I've seen God make a way where none seemed possible. And I pray he's doing it here, for both of us. Her words pierced him in ways no anger or argument ever had. He swallowed hard. I don't know what you're changing here, Clara, he admitted. I'm not changing anything, she replied softly, just being myself, and trusting that God can melt even the hardest hearts. The first sign of thaw. That night, as she rose to serve the stew she had kept warm, Elias stopped her. He hesitated, his voice rough. I'm not sure I said this right before about Christmas, but She looked at him, heart thumping softly. Yes. I don't want you to leave, he said simply. Clara's breath caught, eyes shining. Elias. I gave you a deadline, he said quickly, ashamed of the quaver in his voice. I didn't think. I was wrong. I want you to stay. Her lips trembled in a smile, tears welling but not falling. I've never wanted to go, she whispered. Elias swallowed. Clara Mae. God gave me more than I deserved when he brought you here. She reached out, taking his rough hand in hers. And for the first time in years, Elias didn't pull away. The mountain man who had once feared love, who had built walls against all tenderness, felt something he thought impossible, hope. And it was all because of her faith, her patience, her gentle heart. Where hearts finally speak the truths they've been hiding. The morning of Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold. The mountains glimmered like diamonds under a thin layer of frost, and snowflakes clung to the pines as if holding their breath in reverence for the day. Inside the cabin, however, a warmth far deeper than fire glowed in the hearts of two people who had once thought the cold would never leave them. Elias Thorne rose from his bed early, the anticipation and nerves he felt foreign and unnerving. He dressed slowly, the creak of leather boots against the floor sounding louder than it should have. Clara Mae Whitaker was already awake, kneeling by the hearth with her Bible open, whispering prayers for the day, for him, for the world around them. A moment too long in silence. Elias watched her from the doorway. She didn't look up, didn't notice him yet. The soft candlelight caught the curve of her face, the gentle arch of her hands, the steadfastness in her posture. She had changed his home, yes, but more importantly, she had changed him. Her quiet faith, her unwavering patience, her gentle love, it had softened the edges he had spent years sharpening. And now, for the first time, he feared the very thing he had been trying to avoid, losing her. The confession he could no longer hide. Clara, he began, his voice low and hesitant. She didn't look up. I need to tell you something. She tilted her head, curious but patient. Yes. He swallowed, feeling the lump in his throat that had been building for weeks. I was wrong. About everything, about how I treated you when you first arrived, about the deadline, about you. Finally she looked up, her eyes shining with cautious hope. Elias. I've pushed everyone away my whole life, he continued. I told myself no one could stay, that no one could ever understand me, that no one could ever love me. His voice faltered, thick with emotion. But you stayed. You prayed. You cared. You didn't run. You didn't judge. And now... He paused, unsure if he could finish. She leaned slightly forward, her heart open. Now, I don't want you to leave. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Tears welled in her eyes. Elias, I never wanted to go. He stepped closer, closing the space between them for the first time since her arrival. I rejected you because of your size, he admitted, his voice shaking. But God used your gentle heart, your faith, your love to show me what true beauty really is. A Christmas Eve miracle. Clara Mae Whitaker let out a soft laugh, trembling with joy and relief. God truly works in mysterious ways. Elias reached for her hands. Clara, will you stay as my wife? Truly stay? Her voice trembled as she whispered, yes, with all my heart. He drew her close, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling. Outside, the mountains reflected the first golden rays of the rising sun, but the real miracle was here, inside the small cabin. Two hearts once guarded by fear and grief now entwined in trust, forgiveness, and love. The fire crackled beside them, but neither noticed the warmth. It had nothing to do with the hearth. For the first time, Elias Thorne allowed himself to believe that God had not abandoned him. That love could come in the shapes he intended, even when it defied every expectation. A silent prayer shared. As they embraced, Clara whispered a prayer under her breath. Lord, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for showing me that even the hardest hearts can be softened with your love. Bless this home, our hearts, and the life we are beginning together. Elias, unaccustomed to prayer but deeply moved, whispered beside her. Lord, thank you for her. For showing me what I've been blind to all these years. They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the wind outside, the fire crackling, and the quiet miracle that had taken root between them. The Christmas Eve sky outside blazed with light as if heralding the start of something new. And inside, Elias Thorne and Clara Mae Whitaker began a life built on faith, forgiveness, and the kind of love that only God could orchestrate. The first step toward family. Elias pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Claire, I want more than this cabin. I want a home, a family, a life we can share. I want all of it with you. She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. Elias, I've prayed for this my whole life. And now, God has given it to us. They held each other close, hearts beating in unison, both silently marveling that what had begun as a simple test of patience had blossomed into a Christmas miracle neither could have imagined. The mountain man who had once feared love now embraced it fully. The woman who had been rejected once for her size now knew that God's plans were far bigger than human expectations. And the first Christmas Eve together would never be forgotten. Where love, faith, and family begin anew. The morning of Christmas Day arrived like a blessing. Sunlight spilled across the mountains, sparkling on the fresh snow like countless tiny diamonds. The pines stood tall and proud, their branches heavy with snow, and the air was crisp and pure. It was a day that seemed to hold a promise, a day for miracles. Inside the cabin, warmth radiated from the hearth, but it was nothing compared to the glow between Elias Thorne and Clara Mae Whitaker. They awoke wrapped in one another's arms, smiles already bright with shared joy. Christmas had come, but it had brought more than snow and cold. It had brought love, forgiveness, and hope. A morning of gratitude. Clara rose first, humming softly as she began to prepare a simple breakfast of bread, eggs, and venison stew. The cabin smelled of pine and cinnamon, the fire crackling merrily in the hearth. Elias watched her quietly, feeling an ache of wonder in his chest. This woman stayed. She prayed. She loved. And she's mine. He stepped close, brushing snow from her hair and cupping her cheek. Merry Christmas, Clara Mae, he whispered. She looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. Merry Christmas, Elias. He pulled her into a tight embrace. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and their synchronized breaths. The wedding they never expected. Word spread quietly through the small mountain town. The stubborn, lonely mountain man and the mail-order bride who refused to leave were to be married. By afternoon, neighbors arrived with gifts of baked bread, blankets, and warm wishes. Some had doubted Clara could endure life on the mountain. Some had doubted Elias could open his heart again. But now, both were humbled by the miracle God had worked. The ceremony was small and simple. The cabin was decorated with pine boughs, cinnamon sticks, and small handmade ornaments Clara had lovingly prepared. Clara's Bible rested on the mantel, a silent witness to faith and perseverance. Elias stood tall, his rugged hands holding hers firmly. Clara Mae Whitaker, he said, voice steady, you've shown me patience, grace, and the truth of God's love. Will you marry me not because you must, but because we are meant to walk this life together? Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. Yes, Elias Thorne. With God's blessing I will. The small crowd around them smiled as they exchanged simple vows, sealing a love born of faith, courage, and a Christmas miracle. A cabin filled with joy. After the vows, they returned to the hearth to share a meal with neighbors who had become witnesses to their journey. Clara served bread and stew, laughter spilling through the cabin like warm sunlight. Elias watched her, amazed by the joy and love that seemed to radiate from her every gesture. God has truly blessed us, Clara whispered to him as they worked together in harmony. Elias nodded, pulling her close. I never believed I could love again, he admitted. But he brought you here for a reason. You've changed my life. Clara smiled, her hand resting over his heart. And he's not done with us yet. This is just the beginning. The promise of a family. As the afternoon faded into a snowy evening, Elias and Clara stepped outside to admire the mountains. The first Christmas together was not just a celebration of faith, but a promise of the family they would build. Elias bent down and scooped up a handful of snow. He threw it gently at Clara, who laughed and retaliated, the sound echoing across the valley. For the first time in years, Elias laughed freely, his joy unburdened. "Someday," he said, brushing snow from her hair, "I hope we have a family here. Children who will know the same faith, love, and perseverance that brought us together." Clara rested her head against his chest, heart full. "And they will, Elias. Because God's plans are never small. He sees what we cannot." Faith and love restored. As night fell, the cabin glowed softly, and snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky. Elias and Clara knelt side by the hearth, holding hands, giving thanks for the journey that had brought them here. "Thank you, Lord," Clara prayed softly. "Thank you for showing me that love is worth the wait, that faith can soften even the hardest hearts, and that your plans are always perfect." Elias bowed his head beside her, a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Lord, for bringing her to me. Thank you for teaching me to trust, to hope, and to love again." And in that small cabin, atop the snow-covered mountains, two hearts once guarded by fear now beat together with faith and joy. The mountain man and the woman who refused to leave had found more than companionship. They had found God's perfect plan, love restored, and a Christmas miracle they would never forget. Outside, the stars shone brighter than ever, as if the heavens themselves were celebrating with them.